This is the LarryInFishers.com podcast. My name is Larry Lannon. I'm honored to have Sonali Dev as my guest today, a very prolific author, including the book we'll be talking about today and she will be talking about here in Fishers. It's called Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. So Sonali Dev, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast today.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Larry. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
And we'll get into that in just a moment. I want to just remind people that Sonali Dev will be in Fishers Saturday, September 30th, 2023, from 2:30 until 4:30 in the afternoon at the Forum Event Center here in Fishers. And she'll be there with two other authors and talking about books of their own. And we're, as I said, Sonali is a very prolific author. We're going to zero in on one particular book that she'll be here in Fishers to talk about. But Sonali, your background as an American woman, heritage is from the nation of India. You're very front and center about that, of course, in the book Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. You've taken basically Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. It's not a retelling of that book. You're putting your own spin on that idea. So tell us why that Jane Austen novel impacted you.
So I read Pride and Prejudice in middle school, and I actually and it had such an impact on me. I actually blame Jane Austen for the woman I have become. In fact, if I'm ever having a fight with my husband, I'll say take it up with Jane. To that extent, I feel like her books impacted me. And here's why. And also the ironic thing is my introduction to her came through a retelling, because I think we're talking about 1983 or 86, thereabouts. And there was an Indian TV show that was translated from Pride and Prejudice. And this was back in the days of, when we had a couple hours of TV in India. This is in Mumbai, then Bombay, India. And we had a couple hours of TV a week. So this was a big deal when there was a new show. And the thing that struck me was, and I was, as I said, maybe 10, 12, and I was struck by the fact that here was a girl, a woman, who had opinions, who didn't pander to the aunties, who didn't care about being liked. And she ended up being liked for, respected for, and loved for it. And something deep inside me that I believed about myself, which was getting which was not getting no reinforcement from the world around me, or very little reinforcement, just sang. And I ran out and I picked up the book and I read through most of Jane Austen's work. I do have 4 favorite novels. And when I was very young, I translated them into my own world over and over again. Like, this was my daydream as a child. And then once I took up writing professionally, I knew that by that time, she had been retold in terms of culture and translation over and over again, and really beautifully. And that's not what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was pay homage to the lessons I learned from her books that made me who I am today. And so I had this dream of taking my 4 favorite Jane Austen novels and writing them as 4 novels under one story umbrella. And Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors kicks that off. It's the first in that series of 4 novels.
And this is the book we'll be talking about today, Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. You have a new book we'll talk about as we get further along here. But let's talk about Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. The main character is Trisha, I would say. Now, Trisha is a renowned surgeon in San Francisco, yet within her own family, she calls herself the black sheep of the family. So talk about Trisha and how you created her persona.
All right, can you still hear me? Because my volume just went down to 0. Okay, I'm back.
Can you hear me all right?
I'm good. So sorry for that.
Did you hear the question I asked?
The last part. Could you repeat the last part?
Sure, I'd be glad to, because one main character in Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors would certainly be Trisha. And
Yes.
Trisha is a renowned surgeon in San Francisco, yet she still feels like she's the black sheep of the family. So, talk about Trisha and how you created her persona.
So remember how I was saying that Austen was such a huge influence personally for me, and one of the reasons for that was when I was growing up in when I was growing up in India, studying in English thanks to colonization. A lot, everything we were reading was Western literature because I was reading in English, and between the classics and local, films, all of that, there was almost no examples of women who wanted things, women who desired things and got them at the end of the story. All the stories I was reading were either centered around men, or when a woman had any kind of starring role, there was misery at the end. So the only person who, where I didn't find that was Austen novels, where her heroines had enough self-worth to want things, to believe they're worthy of them, and actually got them through the story. Right. And they grew and people around them grew. It wasn't that they didn't, but they demanded things and they desired things and they got them, which was, I think, why I glommed onto her so very strongly, because there was so little of that happening. Having said that, in I wrote this book in 2017, and in 2017, if you had, or even today, if you ask anyone who is a fan of of romantic stories, who the definitive romantic hero is, more than half that room is going to say Mr. Darcy. And on the page, when you read that book, we start with Mr. Darcy being a jerk, and that is actually the whole story. Here is a girl or a woman who has a choice between destitution and marriage, and one of the richest men in England, and therefore one of the richest men in the world, offers for her, but everything she has seen in his behavior tells her that he is not a nice person, and she believes that she has enough self-worth to deserve more. So here's a woman who has to choose between destitution and marriage, and chooses not to marry a man who she believes is not worthy of her. So that's true self-worth. I think women even today are working toward that self-worth. We all are, but the female journey more so is about self-worth because of what the world has taught us from the day we die, the day we're born, about ourselves. So coming back to that, um, I in 2017, and when we write, even now, one of the first things we hear about female protagonists is commentary on likability, and certainly this was happening in 2017, and I was really curious to know if I could, in 2017, write a female character who had that much privilege, because Darcy is also a study in the privilege of his time. He is very much at the top of the ladder in all ways, in the social ladder. And he never apologizes for it. All he doesn't have is the lens of empathy. Right. So that's what he learns through it. So he is arrogant. He owns his privilege very much. And his intention is good, but he has no empathy. And that's his journey. And I wanted to see if I could write a woman like that, who had every privilege of her time. She comes from generational wealth. This is a story of a family that is is descended from royalty in India, has migrated to San Francisco, seen great success, and their oldest son is running for California governor. So they are seeking political power. So they have, every kind of privilege. Trisha personally is, has a genius level, brilliant brain, and all of that. So I literally made a list of all the possible privileges, gave those to her, and it's a gender flip. Trisha is the Mr. Darcy, and I wanted to see, how an audience would react to a woman who has all of that, never apologizes for it, but grows in terms of how she sees the world around her, in terms of her lens of empathy.
Yes, and I do think you provide some level of arrogance, particularly at the beginning of the story with Trisha. But and her as with most stories, and you do this well, her character progresses throughout the book. But the other main character you have is DJ. Now, DJ is where flavors come in when you have Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. And I must tell you, you describe him as a talented chef. And when I started reading your vivid descriptions about the quality of his food, I was ready for a DJ meal right away. It was really it was a great description of that, and you put him out there as one of the best chefs ever. And you give him a very fascinating backstory as well. So tell us a little bit about DJ, the other main character in the book.
So again, this was about how when we meet someone who is seemingly and externally different from us, we don't see them, we see a holographic projection of our own ideas and prejudices, right? That's again at the heart of Pride and Prejudice. And so much of that comes from our own, that can be exacerbated by our own hurt pride and all of that. So it really was that they both have such different upbringings and such different life experiences, and what has been presented to them in terms of opportunity is so very different. And I kind of wanted to play with that, obviously. That piece of Austen's original story. So DJ himself is this person who is full of self-worth, but his self-worth comes from what he is able to give to the world, which is his food. So his form of communicating with the world, his lens, is nurturing, because at the very heart of anyone who likes to feed other people is taking care of them, because this is how we nourish each other, right, with food. And so that is his language. He might be prickly in all other ways, but he doesn't hold back love when it comes to his food. And that, I think, is at the heart of DJ's way of presenting in the world. And having said that, the first time she sees him, all she sees is, a man who is cooking in her parents' kitchen, and is extremely proud and prickly about his creation. And she calls him a very nasty thing. And he sees her as a very nasty person. And then, of course, the whole journey is for them to reconcile how much of that first impression was their own prejudices and hurt pride, and how much was the other person really, which I think is every single interaction we have with each other in today's very heterogeneous world. I think is the heart of what I want to say with this novel.
Yes, you make it very clear that nobody touches DJ's food without his permission, right? And Trisha found out about that. But what brings Trisha and DJ together after that scene, not always in a friendly way, as you mentioned, is Emma. Emma is DJ's sister and Trisha's patient. And you do delve into a number of things there, because there are medical ethics involved, big decisions that are made on a personal level. So tell us more about Emma and how that fits into the story.
So Emma is an artist, where she believes that we were talking about, why you're in this world and what you bring to it, which is what our self-worth usually is tied to. If you took away my storytelling, who would I be, right? And so for Emma, that thing is her art. And she has, spoiler alert, she has a brain tumor in a part of her brain, which almost every surgeon, or every surgeon she has met with, has told her is impossible to remove, and given her a limited time to live. And then she meets Trisha, who obviously is, an incredibly talented surgeon, and obsessed with her work and her patients. And she sees the case, and she can fix it, but because the tumor is growing on where the optic nerves cross over, Emma is going to lose her eyesight. So it has, it has to do with, again, losing identity, because she believes her identity has to do with art. and that once she loses her art, she loses herself. And then, but the only person who can save her life is Trisha. And to DJ, her life is who she is, because she is more than her art. And it really is about how we see ourselves, how others see ourselves, and what love means, and what do we get to decide, about what happens to us. And so that then becomes where all the power, because as I said, so much of that story is about a power imbalance, and there is a power imbalance between DJ and Trisha. And it again is fed by the fact that Trisha literally holds his sister's life in her hands, so to speak. And then the grace with which the two of them navigate that, I think, is again, my exploration into how we should be navigating relationships with each other.
Yes, Trisha's family. I think it's into the family dynamics because DJ's his sister Emma's all he has left family wise, and Trisha has this large family, but they're so dysfunctional in so many ways. I don't know. The family of Trisha is another fascinating part of this story, and there's plenty of family drama. And despite all of her accomplishments, Trisha, you mentioned this earlier, the family seems totally organized around her brother's candidacy for the governor of California. And she had sort of stayed away from that, and she's trying to get back in, but her other family members aren't sure she's sincere. Very interesting part of that story. Tell us more about that.
So as I said, my dream, there was a few things here when we kind of envision a book. It's multiple seeds that kind of have been sitting in our head for a very long time, right? So when people say, what is like the one inspiration of this book or the series, it isn't one thing. For me, it's the stuff that's kind of popping in my head for a very long time. And one of those things was that when stories of the immigrant experience, especially the South Asian immigrant experience, are told, a lot of what we see is pain and self-loathing because of how we're treated, and that growth into really owning your new home, right? So I did want to show the other side. I wanted to show, while those stories are valid, they kind of, even if they can sometimes lean into poverty porn, so to speak, the showing only the darkest parts of that part of the world and the experience of being from that part of the world, when that is one slice of the story. There is also immense amounts of privilege in South Asian American immigrant communities. And that is something I think that also needs exploration, not just in, oh, look, we're so successful, but that comes with all these mindsets we bring with ourselves, our parents bring with themselves, and all of that. So I wanted to kind of show that side of the immigrant experience. The other thing is that as an immigrant, there is a whole ladder of again really owning your home and really making it your own. And one of the one of the later stages in that journey is political power. It's when you say, I am going to make decisions for this place that I live in. That's when it really truly becomes your home, right? So this family is politically ambitious, so there were all those pieces. Having said that, Indian families often, or rather for sure my Indian family, we don't really understand boundaries very well, or our definition of boundaries is entirely different. So here we are in a whole new place where boundaries are defined differently, bringing with us a history of no boundaries between family members. And that brings with it some dysfunction, but also a lot of fun and warmth and kind of depth to quality of life. And so all of that is really important to me in my storytelling, and that's what's in here. Because you have parents who don't understand what, there's actually a line in the book where unconditional love is an oxymoron to our parents, and it was to my parents, and I'm sure my kids sometimes feel that way, even though I try not to be that parent. But if you love someone, as a parent, you want them to give their best so that they can live their best life, and that's a condition, but it is not, because it's love. So what does all that mean? Which is I think a lot of what and this is a big fat Indian American family. And so there's a lot of that. And the four stories go through each sibling and cousin's experience within, the thematic homage to the original plots of Jane Austen's, four novels that I love.
Oh, I'm particularly fascinated with the story between Trisha and her father. That is such an interesting relationship. Maybe it's because I have two adult daughters myself, but explain to me why you painted the father in that picture. And clearly, Trisha wants to have a relationship with her father, but her father, at least early in the book, certainly does push back on that. Explain how you came up with that dynamic.
So the history again of this family is, that they're these three princes. So they're descended from India has this history of princely states because when colonization happened, India was a whole bunch of kingdoms, and when the British came, they got put into their power was entirely taken away, but their lands and their titles were, the figurehead lands and titles were left to them, and they essentially became, tax collectors for the British. And so there's this very kind of complicated history that goes again with, their place in social hierarchy and all of that. And so here are these three young princes, and Shri, who is Trisha's dad, is the middle brother, and it's the quintessential older brother this is kind of the heir of the, he has, after independence, he's running for elections, trying to be that leader that his ancestors were, and so that's his role. The youngest brother is the spoiled, again, quintessential bad boy prince who's always in the media, pushing the law, doing all the things that, the spoiled prince stereotype. And this middle brother has, is smart and has the independence to do what he wants, and he goes to med school. He's also has the nobility but the freedom to live his own life, and migrates to America and wants all these things. But both the other brothers, things don't turn out. He loses the older and the younger brother and ends up being the patriarch. So his own trajectory in life has changed, and he's had to take on the responsibility of being the head of that family. And one of the things that he is obsessed with is his son. I always say, is his son becoming becoming California governor, and having that that power to make decisions about the home they have now made their home. And so he has his own very powerful story. So he again is coming from a place of intention where he thinks the big picture is really important, and he has forgotten the pain, the smaller pain of his children. So this again, I think, is a very universal story of how generations see things differently, and it is their journey of finding their way to each other. And obviously, since we are in Trisha's perspective, we see the unfairness and the harshness very strongly, but I think they both do make that journey. And across the four books, he himself makes the journey of understanding where power and relationships, how the balance between those things for the family is important. And basically that's there. But I will also tell a funny anecdote where I always end up writing these really horrid fathers, and my own relationship with my dad is really fantastic. I think he's the best father in the world. We grew up, I grew up in India, and he is which was completely rare to have a father who was so very non-authoritarian and all those things, right? He is this well, he's perfect, and I could go on, but I'll say that my sister-in-law said to me one time, is you have like the best relationship with your father, and who are these dads you're writing? And I had to stop and think about it. And I think it's a really, in terms of story device, I think I use the fathers as kind of a metaphor for the patriarchy in general. Kind of all the power, when power rests so strongly in one person, what that does, and the imbalance it causes and the pain it causes, and really what the journey of getting away from that is.
Well, if there is an evil character in the book, that would be Julia.
Yes.
you review it's I found it interesting the way you write about Julia, because as the book begins, you know when her name comes up, everybody just kind of recoils, but you're very slow in the book in revealing why, and you kind of bring her into the story in an interesting way. So talk about how you came up with this evil character, Julia.
Oh gosh, yes. So Julia's last name, for those who are Pride and Prejudice fans, is Wickham. So it's Julia Wickham, and Wickham is is again a stand-in for all that is entitled and lazy in society. That's how Jane Austen wrote him, and I kind of was playing with that a little bit, where there are so many characters in this book who come up against hurdles, and their reaction is to work harder to try and change themselves, to try and change their circumstance. But here we have a character who comes up against hurdles and feels wounded because she feels entitled to something different, right? And those are the two ways in which we can face hurdles and disadvantages. And so I think the deep anger she has, where anything she does is justified if someone has more than her, is at the heart of the, which is I think why she strikes such such terror in everyone's heart, is because if you have more than her, she literally feels like a person who, if she had to poison you, would be okay, because how dare you have more than her. And I think that's at the heart of it, and she really hurts the people in this book quite horribly. And I think that's kind of where, to me, that was the soul of her heart, that she herself feels hurt by how what the world has given her, compared to what she sees as this embarrassment of riches in the lives of those like Trisha and Yash, who's her older brother, who's running for California governor.
A reviewer of this book, Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, some national public radio, said the following, and I quote, "Pride feels more like a love story about family, redemption, and acceptance than a traditional romance with food as a running motif." And the quote there. Agree or disagree?
I absolutely agree and I'm very grateful for the kind words. I do believe that, that I don't really buy into the distinction between love story and romance in that particular way. I think a romance is simply, a love story that ends with happiness. So publishing tends to make the distinction as, calling the ones that end in tragedy a love story, and calling the ones that end in happiness romance. And I think essentially they're both stories of love and stories of growth, where we make ourselves worthy of love by falling in love with ourselves first. And I think that that's the essential journey for me.
And one more question for you before I do that. Once again, a reminder that Sonali Dev, who we're speaking to right now, will be appearing in Fishers Saturday, September 30th, 2023. It's an afternoon event, 2:30 until 4:30 at Forum Events Center. She'll be there with two other authors who have written their books sort of inspired by some other book. And we talked to Natasha Bowen just a few days ago, and Skin of the Sea, where Little Mermaid was her inspiration. And there'll be one other author with caters more to the small child. Just a reminder about that, and people will be able to get their book signed. You can talk to the authors. It should be a great afternoon. My final question to you is, even I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say the book comes to a very nice ending, but that's not the end of the story, is it? Tell us.
It is not, because it is kind of the new beginning for Trisha and DJ, and we do get to follow them a little bit in the other three novels. But the next one is called Recipe for Persuasion, and that's set on a cooking show, but is an homage to A Second Chance, which is Jane Austen's Persuasion. And then we have Incense and Sensibility, which is the story of the brother who's running for governor. And that's a story of believing something about yourself all your life and something, boom, taking it away. And then finally it's the Emma Project, which is the youngest brother, and that's a gender flipped Emma homage again, where, and that kind of, I think my focus there is on charity in the modern day, where when you have more than someone else, what that, and you believe you can change the lives of other people because you have more, and what that means in terms of power and social structure. So, which is what I think the original Emma story is about. She believes she knows better because she has more, and so that's that flip.
To remind us the title of that latest book you have coming out.
So I have a book coming out September 26th, and I will show it here if you don't mind. It is called
Sure.
Lies and Other Love Languages, and that is a story of a deep, deep friendship of these two girls starting in the 70s. So it starts in Los Angeles in the 70s between these two South Asian American girls, and that friendship's been broken up for 27 years now, and it's kind of an unraveling for how that happened when one of their daughters finds out in a DNA test that her mother is not her mother.
See. Well, listen, this is a great conversation, and I will say this. I might look at my four grandparents, and they all have different ethnic backgrounds. We are all from someplace else in our heritage here in America, and this is an outstanding book about people who are from somewhere else come to America to become successful. And in that sense, I think it's a very American story. And we have a large Indian American community here in Fishers. So I would believe that they would be very interested in reading this book and your others. So, Sonali Dev, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you today.
The very same. Such a pleasure. Thank you, Larry.